Let's get a quick take on U.S. Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos visiting Colorado this week as a part of her Rethink School tour. The controversial education secretary was met by demonstrators as she visited Firefly Autism House in southeast Denver. Patty Calhoun from Westward, let me first begin by thanking you for taking over host duties while I was away. I'm sure our viewers enjoyed an opportunity to hear intelligent questions for at least a couple weeks. We're going to put that right to bed today. So thank you for doing that. What did you think of the visit from Secretary DeVos?
And thank you very much for returning. It was interesting that she chose Firefly because, of course, Firefly was the scene of the case that went to the Supreme Court, and they issued their decision back in January, the Andrew F. case that said that for an autistic child, sometimes public school wasn't going to be enough and that private school, the proper private school, was acceptable. That's gone back down to the lower courts for the reimbursement issue. So we're going to be hearing plenty more about that. It's a Colorado case. As for protesters, sure, until she proves she knows what the Americans with Disabilities Act means, there will be protesters.
Indeed, there will be. Mike Krause joins us from the Independence Institute. Mike, the Institute has been doing a lot of work in education issues. They're not afraid of controversy, and here we have a pretty controversial education secretary. What do you think of this Rethink School plan that has been part of this tour?
Well, first, it's interesting that, of course, Betsy DeVos was met by protesters because there's a cottage industry whose job it is to protest her to the point she needs to be escorted to avoid physical harm from time to time. But this was a very different visit, actually. The last time she was in Denver, and by the way, the protests were very different. I don't think a lot of these people weren't DeVos protesters. They were general protesters. There was some anti-Trump stuff, some DACA stuff going on. She was here to talk broadly about parental choice in education to the American Legislative Exchange Council, which is also a lightning rod for protests. So it was a much bigger, grander protest. Keep in mind that Betsy DeVos was here today talking about this rethinking education, making the specific point that parental choice also applies to kids with special needs. So the political optics would have been different for protesting, because essentially you would have been protesting a woman who was here making the case that, yes, these kids and their parents actually deserve options, which is a big part of this Rethinking Schools things, is options and parental choice. So, yeah, she's met by protesters, but a very different dynamic than last time she was here.
John Bowman from 5 Points News joins us. John, Colorado is no stranger to controversial education issues. We've had a lot of them go to court here. We've had a variety of school districts go at it and offer new different reform ideas. So do you think Colorado might see Betsy DeVos more often because of our general nature about education?
Well, appropriate ambitious is one of the words that, or one of the phrases that they use for this visit. You know, while great advances have been made for kids with disabilities and mainstreaming them into regular classes, I think a lot of times that works for some, but not for all. And in many cases, sometimes teachers that deal with special needs children, you know, say it's detrimental to some of the classes that they're in. So I guess at some point, parents having to sue to get their students into classes that they need, I think that's going to be the big issue going ahead. And having to sue to get in classes is probably not a good thing.
Ian Silveri, Executive Director at Progress Now Colorado, rounds out the panel. It's good to have you back here. Ian, when you see these kind of protests of a national figure coming to town, do you think that might lead to some local action? Does that spur some momentum?
Well, I mean, the fact is that many folks on the left, the middle, and plenty on the right actually don't understand why Betsy DeVos is the Secretary of Education. Her qualifications are mysterious, and the only one anyone can really conjure up is the fact that she's a pretty big donor to the Republican Party. So her visits to Colorado will remain controversial because she still hasn't set foot in a public school in the state of Colorado, which is where the vast majority of children in Colorado get their education. Colorado has a decent school choice framework, better than a lot of other states, especially Michigan, where the DeVos clan has sort of been hammering away at it for quite a while. But the fact is that, you know, it's kind of low-hanging fruit to go say we support kids with disabilities. Everybody supports kids with disabilities. I think it's really important that we move forward on that policy, state level, local level, and the federal level as well. But I mean, until Betsy DeVos proves that she's actually a qualified Secretary of Education, she's going to be met with resistance whenever she shows up here.